All right. I will say hello and welcome back to another episode of All About Balance. And today I'm joined again by my long lost friend at this point, Mr. Marpo? Jesus fucking Christ. It's late here and it's early for you. I apologize. Marko Papuckovski. Marko, how's it going, my
Marko
friend?
Papuckovski, good, my friend. We're going to try and match energies considering it's 11 p.m. for you and 8 a.m. for me. And I'm having my
Yes.
first coffee of the day. So we'll
Well,
try
I
and
mean,
match it up.
it's a solid start. You mentioned just off air about a short clip I put out about determinism, and I mean I put two out. One was whether AI and virtual reality will essentially be the death of what it is to be human. And
Mm.
then the other, I can't remember what the other one was, but something similar. And yeah, and my thoughts are kind of consumed between two things at the moment. The first is AI and the future of humanity, and the second is jiu-jitsu, obviously. But
Yeah.
but yeah, how have you been, my friend? How's things?
I've been good, man. I've been good. Been training hard lately. Been focusing on the business. I'm trying this new thing called no days off. So I've
Okay,
picked three things that I want to educate myself and improve on, and I take no days off.
okay,
And I realized that it's better to make small progress than no progress, right? Um, and I actually got it from the Gordon Ryan podcast. It just made so much sense to me when he spoke to Joe Rogan, and I was like, man, I could do a little bit of jujitsu every day. I could do a little bit of, educating myself on finances every day. I could do a little bit of all of that stuff. Like, there's no reason why I need to take a day off. And so one of the things that I push with my team, like the guys that work for me, and is momentum. If you're on this good momentum, keep it going. Like, wake up the next day and do something. It doesn't have to be a lot, right? But your energy flows where your focus goes, right? If you're focusing on that thing, you will improve in it. So that's been my thing lately, man. So no days off. My body is
interesting.
getting used to it because normally you take like a day in between hard sessions, but I'm not.
And how are you? Yeah, I mean, there's obviously there's a lot to go through there. The first thing is that I'll ask about is the business. So where is the business right now? When we spoke almost a year ago now,
Yeah.
uh, the business was, and this is sort of like just after I left Montreal and I was back in London and doing whatever. Lockdown had started. The business was doing really, really well,
Hmm.
but my understanding is the business has taken on new life. So if you could explain where the business is now for the people that listen to the first podcast.
Taking like new grounds. Your nutrition needs, like this idea around nutrition was really always the focus. So people would come to us and ask about, what do I eat? What type of diet do I need? What supplements do I take? All the tactical math problem stuff. And once you get that out of the way, which really doesn't take long, it takes us 90 minutes, an hour. We build a big treatment plan for people, we'll send it to them. And then we're left with, why aren't you doing the thing that you know you should be doing?
Sure.
Right. And so what we've realized is that we 70% of my time with my patients ends up being acceptance commitment therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, some type of mindset work where I'm trying to get them to actually do the things and build these habits into their life.
Yeah.
And so we are changing the brand because I'm not just a nutritionist. Like, we don't just do nutrition. In fact, we do like way more than that. And I really want it to be about making humans more resilient. I want it to be about making humans more psychologically flexible, more physically flexible, more biochemically flexible so that they'd never break, right? Their ability to bounce back from tough situations, which you're always going to have, right? So there's this entire movement in the health industry at the moment of mindfulness and meditation and avoiding the hard thing. Like, just sit with your thoughts and avoid the hard thing and don't get stressed. And I'm like, can I swear?
Oh, bro.
I'm like, fuck that. Like, building anything meaningful for yourself is going to require a shit ton of stress,
Yeah.
right? And your ability to handle that stress and to bounce back from that stress is going to determine how much you can do. So my thing is like, make you healthier, make you more resilient so that you can do more, not that you can do less. So
So you mentioned the three. three types of therapy that you feel like you're engaging in, right? Does it feel like you're playing the father figure?
Sorry, I lost you there for a sec. What did you say?
Does it feel like you're playing the father figure to a lot of people?
Yeah, sometimes. But you like it's that real like patient practitioner relationship where you get somebody who in their normal life won't have these conversations. Right? I have people tell me things that they're not telling anybody else. And they really come to you with confidence. The idea of like patient confidentiality is something we take seriously. It's not really parenting, it's more facilitating.
Sure, which to me is parenting, frankly.
Yeah, you could say that. Yeah. Same.
Yeah. But I think the thing that struck me when you were talking, right, is you were saying that you wanted to make people more flexible so that they wouldn't break, right? That's not too dissimilar to an engineer talking about a robot, right? Now, I'm definitely not saying that you're attempting to play God or anything like that. But what I feel is that we are aligning ourselves now in this era of humanity to. It's almost like all the big problems are fixed. You know what I mean? Almost all of the big problems are fixed, right? In that you are going to live today and you're going to carry on with your work. And the imminent threat of a lion coming and eating you and your family is pretty small, right? So generally, we've fixed most of the big problems, right?
Yeah.
And it now feels like we're rising above our old station and squandering over these problems, almost the meta problem, the micro problems, sorry, right? And one of those micro problems, as you say, is efficiency and trying to be as boisterous and as bolstered as possible as humans, right?
I mean, I could go on about first world problems for ages. I'm happy to talk about that too. Who was it that I was having a conversation with? I can't remember now, but I listened to a really great interview yesterday with Sean. I forget his surname, but he's a former Navy SEAL, and he runs like a podcast or a YouTube channel called Vigilante something. And
yes, I've heard of this too.
And he debates for 2 hours with a liberal. He's a young dude, like very, very like good debate, not like a hostile debate about demonetizing police and the whole police brutality and whatever type of thing.
Yeah.
And we're dealing with these. I think humans. I think as a society, we've stopped taking accountability for the things that we are doing wrong as individuals. Right.
I have some thoughts on this, yeah.
Yeah. And we have one of the debates was the guy reached into the police officer's belt and took out his gun. He thought it was the gun, but it was actually the taser. Right. And the police officer turned around and shot him. Right. Which fucking right. Like, why would you reach, who in their right mind reaches in a police officer's belt and takes a weapon, right? You stole it. Am I supposed to depend on you tasering me and then not killing me? No. Right. And then we have this huge uproar by society. Like, why did he get shot? Well, wait a minute. Why? Can we take a step back and why did he take the weapon out of the belt? So we have this idea of like, yeah, we've solved all the big problems and now we're focusing on these little and I made a post about that as well. Like Instagram changed their policy the other day and they started to include like gender pronouns. You can put gender pronouns on your profile, which is great, but it was on the same day that Palestine was being bombed by Israel.
Yeah.
And I'm like, are we really that fucking concerned? Like, we pretend that we are so woke, we are so ahead of the game, that we're so inclusive of everything and everybody, but we're not, right? We live in these high GDP Western countries, UK, Canada, Australia,
The
US, New
yeah.
Zealand, right? We are so removed from reality, it's not even funny, right?
Well, that's not quite true. What we're removed from is the reality of others, right?
Mm.
The reality of a high GDP country is pretty similar across the board.
Yep.
In the same way that the pattern of life for a low GDP country is relatively similar. I think the accountability that you speak of when it comes to that reality is the understanding of how that reality came to be. Because generally, a country doesn't miraculously, magically make a high GDP. The likelihood is they've either begged, borrowed, or stolen, or all of the above. Certain things that have a high GDP from countries that now seem to have a low GDP, right? So I think you're absolutely right that we have, in the hierarchy of problems, there are problems that should take a more prominent global position than a big tech company producing and pronouncing a change that allows people to change digital words to different digital words, right? For sure. However, Instagram should just crack on and do whatever they were doing, right? They obviously had a release schedule and that's fine. But as you say, the use of that platform could have been better utilized, and the use of everyone's platform could have been better utilized to shine light on something that, as we've just alluded to, should have a far more prominent standing in the global hierarchy of problems. The thing that makes me very pessimistic about these things is that the root of it is money, right? The way that I see it, the root of it is money. If we look at the coronavirus, for instance, and forget all of the stuff, but if we just look at one aspect of it, and that's that essentially the global community of clinicians and research doctors banded together, for good or for bad, right, and produced a vaccine in a time that was 5-6 times quicker than you'd expect a regular vaccine to be produced, right?
Yeah.
If we channeled, and the reason why that happened, in my opinion, is because there was money to be made, right? If you're Pfizer or if you're AstraZeneca or whatever, there is billions and billions of dollars for you to make by spending half that, right?
Yeah.
So it makes absolute sense to pull all of the resources you have into solving problem X. Well, if problem Y was Palestine, and we were able to pull the same amount of resources together to solve that problem, and we then multiplied those resources by a value of X and looked at Syria, right? I wonder what the world could be like.
Yeah. And hey, I'm probably more optimistic about the whole thing than anything. Like, I don't want to sound like a negative pessimist.
Yeah, I definitely am that negative pessimist, by the way.
My baseline for operating throughout the world is that I trust everybody until I no longer do, right? Mm-hmm. And I allow people and I open the doors, and that sometimes doesn't work very well for me, but for the most part, it works well. So it's like this, 7 out of 10 times I build a relationship with someone like you, where we had just met in the gym and I was like, cool, come to my house.
Sure.
Right? Or I meet somebody, a friend of a friend online, and we get coffee and they're like, try this capsule that I did with all these herbs. And I'm like, yeah, cool, I'll take it. Right. Like, I've done that before, like first time meeting someone. So 7 out of 10 times it does, that optimism works for me really well. 3 out of 10 times it might not, right? It might backfire. But that's a conscious decision that I make. I'm like, do you know what? Like, I am going to continue to live as an optimist with trusting people and seeing the good in humans. Now, I do think there's a whole heap of good in humans. I don't think Pfizer, I don't think
for sure.
I don't think anyone's trying to deliberately like master this plan where they're going to depopulate the world and the vaccines are going to do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, sure.
Like, it is just a matter of priorities, and it's just a matter of money and attention.
Yeah.
right? Like these platforms, the reality is, Kim Kardashian will get more hits on Instagram today than what Palestine and Israel conflict will. That's just what it is, right?
Sure.
It is just a matter of attention, and attention is currency these days. So
So
Elon Musk will tweet about Bitcoin and that'll get more shares than what Israel and Palestine will. It's just how the world operates.
Sure.
So,
And I want to draw this back to I went on a massive tangent. I apologize. I want to draw this back slightly to the accountability thing that you were speaking of earlier. And I think the point you've just made is really pivotal to that overarching theme. And I think that it's the ability for a lack of accountability. God, that's poor English. But for us to be able to be privileged enough, and I will use the word privileged, enough to refrain from accountability, I think is because of how ingrained we are with the internet and how easy it is. Because think about this. Elon Musk essentially committing fraud by fluctuating the markets and influencing the markets via Twitter, right? Gets more attention than Syria or Palestine or whatever, right? Kim Kardashian, as you say. All of these things are exaggerated notions of reality. They're all exaggerated positions. Not a lot of them are taking what we would determine accountability to be. And that's what gets more attention, right? So if the currency is attention, how do you garner more attention? You exaggerate reality more and more and more. And you exaggerate reality in a way that wouldn't be fashionable, wouldn't be proper, wouldn't be easy to replicate in what we determine to be reality. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right?
Yeah. Here's a thought though. These platforms, like these huge social media platforms, they do censor content.
Sure.
And they do shut down content. Like I'm an advertiser. I love that people spend so much time on Facebook because it means that they see my ads.
Yes.
Right. Like we advertise in the lifetime of the business. We've spent over 6 figures in advertising. I woke up in January. I can't remember what date it was. I just woke up. My account was shut down. I was like, wait a minute. All my data that I've used for 18 months, for 2 years, that I've built and that I've all these trackers and my audiences, they're all gone. And you put through an appeal to said company and you get nothing back. And that's it. It's done. It's over. Like you have to just start a new account and start all over again. No explanation. Where in the world, where could you possibly experience that same thing? Which company that you would walk in physically and let's say you have a bank account, an investment account with a bank, I don't know, Bank of Canada or whatever. And one day they just shut down your account. And you're like, wait a minute, why was my account disabled? Like, no explanation. Violated policy. Which policy? Don't know.
Sure. I mean, and this may lead us into the AI thing even more, is that one of the problems that you're having is that it probably wasn't a real human that shut down your account. Instead, it's essentially a piece of AI or something similar. What will likely have happened is there will be a keyword database, right? Yep. A metadata database, and there will be a crawl of all words and posts on said platform. And if enough of those metadata keyword searches match, an action will be taken. Right?
Yeah.
It's very arbitrary in that way.
I've been talking about this idea of like society removing humanity, and especially in societies like high GDP countries, it's more and more prevalent, right? And it's not good for us. Like where I'm from in Macedonia, let's say you get pulled over by the cops in Macedonia. I'll give you a story. Me and my cousin Victor, I was 16.
Victor.
Victor, and we live in this town, and it's next to a huge mountain, and people go there and they ski and they do all sorts of stuff and they do paragliding. And you would go there and you'd go to the bars and drink because there's all these hot German tourists and Norwegian tourists and whatever, right? And so we drove the family car, which was like a manual Zastava, like a communist car, like a fucking, you barely get into third gear, right? And we get drunk and I'm 16, he's 18, 19, and we're driving back and we get pulled over by the cops and he's wasted, right? But the cop knows who he is. He knows my uncle. He knows the family. He knows everybody, right? So we get pulled over by the cops. He's like, guys, what are you doing? And he's like, I live down the road. Like, I'm literally 100 meters away from my home. And he's like, look, I know you're drunk. I should really give you a fine. But how about just leave the car here for a sec, go get some water, take 30 minutes, have a coffee, whatever, come back, drive the car home, right? So we do that. We get no fine. Wake up the next morning. We run into the car. Hey, how are you going? Coffee? All right. Don't do that again. No, thank you. Right. All good. Everyone's happy. You go on, you live in society and you respect that police officer for what they did. And then you learn your lesson and you, right? Positive everything. I get put over here, right? I'm driving. I get pulled over. I don't have my physical license with me. It's in my other gym bag at home. Right. And the police officer says, where's your license? I'm like, I don't have it with me. It's in my other bag. But I know my license number. It's 177077748. You can look it up. She looks it up. She's like, yep, you do have a license, but you don't have your physical license. I'm like, well, I know there's a law that I could bring it in to a station within 24 hours of not having it to present it to you, right? She's like, yep, but I'm going to give you a fine. I'm like, but I have a license. Like, I'm not speeding. I wasn't speeding. I haven't been put over for drink driving. I've just routine stop and I don't have my license and I can bring it in. She's like, no. I remember being like 21 at the time, barely having any money. And she fined me like $280. And I'm like, what the fuck? So now I continue living my life with fuck cops, right? If you don't want to treat me like a human, as if you haven't made that same mistake, like you remove the humanity from the world, then we will all stop treating each other like humans.
So let me ask you a first principles question, or as close to a first principles question as I can ask.
Yeah.
Why is it good to be human?
Because we're not rigid. We're not meant to be rigid. We're meant to be flexible. We're meant to be understanding. Otherwise, don't be human. Like, I don't know, like, how are you supposed to live your life?
Finish that sentence.
Don't be human.
Right.
Right. If you want to live like by these rules, like these, that's programming. That's like zeros and ones. If this, then that. Okay. Let me know how that goes for you.
So I think two things. And anyone that's listened to the last two, maybe even the last three podcasts will probably be sick of me saying this, but I'm going to say it again anyway. I feel like that's exactly the route that we're going. I feel like in the same way that a government may bring about harsher, stricter, more restrictive rules as their population spirals out of control, you're going to see the same thing happen with data, right? We've already kind of seen it with a couple of the companies that we've spoken about previously, right? Now, if we look at the relationship between humans and data and how they are integrating together to make a duality faster than we've ever seen ever before, right? So I think there are 2 points I'll make. The first one is that if that continues at the same exponential rate that it seems to be going, then one will cross over entirely into the other. And I don't think either will exist anymore, right? There won't be such a thing as data. There won't be such a thing as humanity. There will be a new thing, right? Whatever that thing is. But both will cease to exist in the way that we know it right now. The second thing, I think, is that the programming that you mentioned has been happening for a long time. It's just never happened at the scale that it's able to happen right now. So if we look at propaganda, right, war propaganda, for instance, that's programming, right? In a sense, if we think about our brains as flexible and as whatever as they are also malleable, as you know. You wouldn't be able to create effective change in your business if a brain wasn't malleable, right? So if a brain is malleable, it's malleable for more than one thing. So war propaganda will allow you to look at a certain topic in a certain fashion. That goes back hundreds of years, right? Way before the First and Second World War. I think now, however, the ability for maneuvering inside the marketing space, whether that be biological or otherwise, has a much higher purchase on humanity than it ever has. And I feel like the way that that's happening is via tech. So the resulting action is people acting like tech.
Yeah, these rigid kind of rules of like this, this, so that kind of happens. But man, as much as we do have this huge tech influence and the world is heading towards a data kind of world, I do still think humanity will prevail. It always has.
I definitely don't.
I do.
So, okay. If you can state why you think it will continue.
Because it always has in the past. Like if you look at, let's say the programming of World War II and the war propaganda and all that, humanity prevailed. It's not as if those societies continue to live that way, and no matter how strong the programming was at the time, right? Again, the optimist in me says that humans haven't really gone that far, not that far removed from tribal societies where we live in union because we have to, literally, for our survival.
Yeah.
And so once you start to separate us and treat us as robots, which we're not, we're actually animals, right? The brain isn't that far removed from that. It's only a couple thousand years ago.
Yep.
So I don't think it's going to be successful to turn us into AI operated millennials who do things rigidly. I just don't think you can't remove emotionality from the equation. You can't remove people's feelings and wants and needs and primal needs, right? Are you going to tell me that people don't want to have sex? You're gonna program that into them.
So
and they're not going to want to breed.
I'll come back on both.
And I'm not going to fight back if you fucking try and break into my house.
Sure.
Right? There are people out there. So 70 to 80, whatever, however the percentage of population are normal human beings. But there is that small percentage there who are fucking savages.
Sure.
Right?
Oh, gotcha.
And they will fight back.
Yeah.
And they live in Texas, and they live they're Navy SEALs and they're SAS and they're in jiu-jitsu gyms, and they are not going to agree.
So on the first point of humanity's always prevailed before, I feel like in all the other altercations between humanity, at the core of it, the sole reason for altercation was for human survival, right? So if we talk about World War I or World War II, the idea was that there was a regime that was threatening humanity, right? Therefore, humanity must band together in order to defeat said regime and continue on humanity, right? And thankfully, those things continued. Now, the difference in this altercation is that you're not having an altercation with humanity, right? So humanity versus humanity, generally, good seems to win, right? Generally, right? Well, never before have we had an altercation between humanity and tech, right? So I feel like this is an entirely new frontier of altercation, which is why I don't trust the battles of the past, right? To the second point, I feel like it's not about, we spoke earlier, right? About incrementally, if you do things incrementally, they will soak in far better than if you attempt to do it all in one go, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if we think about our allegiance and our reliance with technology and how that's happened, if we think about how humanity has been ostracized in the last 10 years in comparison to the 10 years before that, if we think about how, you're absolutely right, we're not all that far removed, but how much more removed we are in the last 2 years than we have been in the last 10, right?
Mm-hmm.
Humans are not, in my opinion, humans are no longer looking solely at other humans for all of the primal things that we've talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, they are looking at their phones, right? Well, that's about as inhuman as you're going to get. It's about as rigid, it's about as structured, it's about as programmed as you're going to get.
Yeah.
And what's coming back to you generally is some form of echo chamber of adverts, either via your choice or not via your choice, right? And we touch on the adverts that you made for the business. You worked long and fucking hard. I remember the whiteboard in your flat, right? And you had all sorts of experiments going in there. We had long conversations about you throwing money into this experiment and that experiment, and I need to see if this works and that works and the next one, right? There was a lot of cerebral capacity that you spent, plenty of effort tokens that you threw in the vending machine of adverts. And what did it do? It reaped rewards, right?
Yeah.
Well, let's take one Marko, yeah, and times it by a multi-billion-dollar company.
Mm-hmm.
And then let's talk about influence.
Yeah. What do you do with that power?
It's a good question.
Right. So I was just looking up a statistic. 59.5% of the global population is on the internet. There's another 41% that isn't.
Yeah.
Right. So again, we are in an echo chamber. We think everybody's like us, but they're not. Right. You fly from the UK to Poland and you'll get a completely different reality. Right. And you fly to like Romania and you'll get a completely different reality. Right. The world isn't what it's like in London.
Thankfully.
And the world isn't what it's like in Sydney, thankfully. Right. So when you've moved around and you've traveled and you've seen other societies, you come back and you're like, this just doesn't feel right. And that's like what I'm experiencing at the moment. I'm like, this doesn't feel right. Something is going to go wrong. Right. And there's a whole heap of stuff. Like I'm probably a lot more old school, traditional than like most people, but the family structure, the idea that we can just like destroy all of that and pretend that we're way beyond that and we can all live, it's just, there's a whole heap of shit going on. But yeah, I put in all that effort to make a monetary return, right, to grow my business so that I can make a living, so that I can then impact in the way that I want to, because I have the money problem solved.
Sure.
Right. So it's like, what do I do with that power now? What do I do with that influence?
Yeah. Right. Well, this is actually going to be one of my questions.
Yeah. And what you can do is, if you don't like something, you can choose to disengage from it. Like, yeah, I deleted Instagram again last night. I've deleted it before. I deleted it last year for like 6 months and deactivated my account. And yesterday I was just sitting there and I'm going, I am wasting my time. Like, there are much more effective ways to grow the business. I do not need this. I'm lying to myself that I tell myself that I need this. I'm feeling overwhelmed because every other hour, like I open my phone and my thumb literally just goes to that spot. Right. And it's like, I'm just going to disengage. I quit. I'm out. Right. And there are many people who are out. Like I know many successful people who do not have social media, right? They exist. They're out there. It is just a vanity metric. The idea that that person has 100,000 followers, so they must be high in the social. No, man, there's a guy out there who's way more successful. Let's just use finances because that's how we're measuring success. There's a guy out there who's got 8 supercars and a big company and a lovely family and all the money in the world, and he doesn't have an Instagram account. Right? So how are we measuring this power or success or whatever it is? And a lot of it is just fluff. Like, it's all bullshit, right? Like, I know people with massive followings that are broke.
Sure. However, if we come back to the point that we made before, attention is currency.
Perceived currency, but it's not currency unless you monetize it.
Right, but it is monetized, right?
But it's not everyone that has it monetizes it.
Okay, but that doesn't mean that it's not monetized.
Or monetizes it effectively, right? What I'm saying is, just because you have the attention doesn't mean it's going to bring you reward, except for attention and validation, right?
Right, but it depends.
We live in a society of narcissists, Harry. Sure. Everyone's a fucking narcissist.
Sure, and I think my point is, I don't think it's all that far of a thought experiment leap where the US, the Australian dollar, the English pound or euro, whatever it's going to be, ceases to hold physical value like attention does. Like, if Elon can tweet Dogecoin
and he blows up
and it flies 300% to the sky, money doesn't mean as much as we think it does.
I wonder what my crypto is doing today. Let's have a look. Yeah, I agree. It doesn't mean as much as we think it does.
And if Kim K can make millions of dollars a year, tens of millions of dollars a year from posting on Instagram, it's that monetization. Instagram has to be making that money back in order to pay Kim that slice of the pie, right?
But we're talking about anomalies. The regular person who builds a following, unless they know how to monetize it, they're not going to. Like, again, we have never lived in a culture where me was such a focus.
Sure.
Right? You didn't have people with photo albums back in the day and all the photos were of me. Yeah. Mirror selfies are a 2000s thing that never existed before. No one did it. Right? You go on somebody's account these days, it's me. Look at me. I'm wearing this thing and I'm going to the gym and I'm doing that. And I'm like, man. And I tried something like a couple of months ago. I was like, you know what? I'm going to try and use my platform to shine light on other people that have impacted me, like friends. So I was like, I'm going to write something about my friend Nico and something about my friend and what they taught me, to literally just to move the focus away from me. Like, I know it's my account, but it doesn't have to be all about me.
Sure.
Right. Whereas now and it's all self-centered, all me. And that's, again, removing humanity. Like, you're disconnecting yourself from everyone else. Have photos with your friends. Have a photo of your friend. Write something nice about somebody in your life who's impacted you. Why is it always you? As if you don't owe it to anyone, to become the person that you are now. Like, it's just, man, and I see this all of the time. People come to us and they tell me things privately that they wouldn't tell anyone else, and they're anxious and they're addicted. And it's the mental health is like skyrocketing because of literally narcissism. Like, that's literally narcissism. Grandiose delusions that you're better than what you are, and like putting all your highlights out into the world and all about me. That's narcissism. I'm not saying everyone's narcissistic, but those are narcissistic traits that we are kind of just we've normalized it.
So if we go down the rabbit hole slightly further, if somebody embodies narcissistic traits, what sort of life do you think they have?
Lonely life.
Okay. And if and this is again just merely a thought experiment. I'm just leading you down the garden path.
Yeah.
If somebody were to have a lonely life,
Mm-hmm.
do you think that they would outwardly seek humans, or would they seek more instant gratification, being tech?
External validation, whatever that is, whatever form that comes in, whether it's a like, whether it's a metric. Metrics are easy for humans to measure. So I posted a story. Let me see how many people have seen it.
Yes. Okay.
315 people versus 1.
Yeah. Cool. So to me, we're talking about the removal of humanity and this and that, the next thing, right? And how, you said before, you can't remove the primal thoughts in our brain. And our brains they're not supposed to be rigid. They're not supposed to be this. I think humans 1.0 was supposed to be that. I feel like there is an active evolution happening where what was humanity is dying quickly, or changing. I shouldn't say dying, but changing quickly. Right? Narcissism, or the narcissistic traits that you've already mentioned, are becoming the new normal for the 59% of people that are on the internet. Or I should say, a lesser degree of that, let's say 35% of the 59% on the internet, right?
Yeah.
Those narcissistic traits are becoming the new normal. Where I think this is going to get really interesting is 59% is going to change. It's going to grow quickly, right?
Yeah.
When that 59% is 85% of people are on the internet, I would be really interested to see what humanity looks like.
The positive part is that the younger generation, like I have a younger sister, and she knows a lot about anxiety, mental health, when to get off the internet, she knows all that stuff that I didn't know at her age.
Sure.
Right? I had no idea that stuff even was a thing, right?
Sure.
But here's a challenge for everyone listening. Like, what can you actually do to try and change individually, like as an individual, to keep up? Like, next time you take a photo of something cool, instead of posting it on your account, just send it to someone. Send it to one person. Hey, Harry, I'm eating a salad. Thought of you. Right?
Yeah.
Try that. And see if you feel that same, because every time there is a benefit to every behavior, right? So you'll send that photo hoping to build a connection. So you want something to be reciprocated, right?
Yeah.
See how that works for you. And if that fills the whole of the versus 1,000 people seeing your photo, or 800 people liking your photo, or whatever the fuck, right? Because all those like vanity metrics, you could live your life on that platform and it doesn't move the needle. It doesn't do anything for you, right? It actually, like, if you remove that, if I take your phone away for you for a day, like what are you doing? How do you feel without it? Where are you getting your validation, your love, your like connection? Where is that coming from? And most people, they're not getting it. They've replaced it with that.
Right.
So anyway, we went on a big tangent, huh? But it's sad, man. Like it is sad. Like I actually would like for us to learn how to manage that a little bit better, and hope, I would love if those platforms were to release educational material to be like, hey, if every time you unlock your phone, your thumb goes to Instagram automatically, that's an addiction. Here's how we can help you.
I think you're absolutely right. I think controls should be put in place. Like, it's all well and good that the iPhone now has a metric that says, by the way, your screen time has gone up 15% last week, or, this has gone up, or that's gone up, or you should take time from your phone, and you can set limits so that your phone will essentially shut down, right, at certain times and whatever. But you can always override them at a big click of a big nice button saying unlock, right?
Yeah.
I feel like, just to give a shout out to somebody from TriStar, Tanya, Super Saiyan Magical Girl, on Instagram, if anyone wants to go look at that. Yeah, she has a really good way of doing things, but I think tech should back that sort of thing. So she obviously, for her life, how she makes money is by posting things to her following on Instagram, right, and selling artwork and all that sort of stuff. And she only posts on a Monday and a Friday. It doesn't go on Instagram between those days, right?
Yeah.
I think you should be able to program that Instagram will only open on a Monday and a Friday. You can press that button to your heart's content. Doesn't matter. It won't open until it's 0001 on a Monday and turns off at 0001 on a Tuesday and turns back on at 001 on a Friday and turns back off 001 on a Saturday. Because, legitimately, Instagram is a fantastic platform for you to market ideas and businesses and these sorts of things. It is, right? Like, absolutely. If I was to do it, I would have it on a Monday and a Wednesday, because that's when I post my podcast stuff, and then the podcast clips on a Wednesday, right? Fine. Yeah. But I have no need to be on it other than that. Do you know what I mean? I have no need whatsoever. I don't have Twitter on my phone anymore. I only literally go on Twitter when it's fight nights, right? Because I like watching the stuff that happens, the commentary, stuff, the blow up stuff. Yeah, I like that. It's enjoyable to watch. But other than that, I don't go on Twitter. I only go on Facebook to post podcast stuff, and then I don't go on it ever again. I think you're right. Tech backing those things would be good, but it's entirely antithetical to what they're attempting to do.
Yeah. And this is where that individual accountability and choices come into play. Like, you can turn your phone into something really productive. Your books app can be on your home screen, so that when you're bored, you just click it and you read something. Who cares? Anything, right? Yeah. You could have, I find Reddit a really good platform because I can read on Reddit, right? And I can see things and I can educate myself. So I like Reddit. You could have investment advice or jiu-jitsu clips. Like, you could turn this into a weapon, right? And you could learn a heck of a lot, and it's all on one device. Like, you're sitting on the train, I forgot my book. That's okay. It's on your phone, right? So you can do that. All of that is there. You can become a producer instead of a consumer, right? And man, we get people with a whole heap of generalized anxiety, like almost everybody has some level of anxiety to them. And part of it is just that we don't have stillness, right? Like, we don't have time for stillness. We don't make time for stillness. And when we do have time for stillness, we're scrolling through things, and it's kind of like a slot machine, and we're like, blah, 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 blah. And you're like, man, I don't have solitude. Like, if you guys are listening, Stillness is the Key by Ryan Holiday, amazing book. Do you know Winston Churchill used to do bricklaying? That was his stillness, right? These practices of just monotonous, same thing. This podcast, it unfortunately won't get as many views as Jake Paul's short video and whatever, because of the entertainment value, right? Sure. So we want that stimulus, and we've actually just we've just removed all stillness from society. Everything's stimulus.
Yeah, I mean, this is, and just to make this a slightly more selfish point, this is something that one of the reasons why I've moved to clips.
Yeah, right? You have to.
Is because there are conversations that have been had on this podcast that I have found deeply enriching, deeply informative, and will stay with me for a long time, right? But nobody's heard them. Maybe 100 people have downloaded it, which means nothing. It doesn't mean anything as to what level of what percentage of the content they've actually listened to. And I'm torn by it, because in one sense, I'm like, I don't care. This thing was for me. This whole point was that I have interesting conversations, just like the one we're having right now. I put them out, and if anyone listens, fine. If nobody listens, fine. But then there is the other side of me saying, but people should listen. Like, I'd want to listen to this if I was on the other side. So it's how do I get that out? And to your point, you have to sign part of your life away to the devil if the devil is tech, right? In order for you to reap the rewards that you supposedly seek. And the stillness thing is very interesting because you made a comment earlier about there's a big directive in the health community right now about meditation and stillness and this and that, the next thing, and it's kind of overblown and whatever. But as you've just said, there is absolute merit in it. And I think, there are some people that I know very well that will go to bed staring at their phone, and the first thing they do in the morning is wake up and stare at their phone, right? Now, there are obviously productive reasons that you could stare at your phone, like checking the camera to make sure the dog's still alive and, whatever. Or you can have less productive reasons to stare at your phone, i.e. scroll through Instagram to see what's changed in 6 hours, which is nothing, right? You're seeing the same posts you saw 6 hours ago, and yet you're still scrolling. I don't really take a negative or a positive stance on this stuff, to be honest, because it feels as though it's going to happen regardless. You mentioned, the Texans are going to rise up and fight back, right? Yeah. Maybe.
Not against tech, but the idea that you're going to turn us into robots, I don't think that's going to happen. I think there's a whole bunch of people out there that are like, fuck that, I'm going to fight back, right? The loudest groups out there they don't represent the majority of the population.
But they do influence the majority, right? Like somebody, if you've said 59% of the population are on the internet, then 59% of the population have been delivered personalized ads in some fashion. That's just the way it is, right? There's no two ways about that. They are going to have interacted in some fashion with Google or Microsoft or Apple or Huawei or something else, or Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or Snapchat or whatever it is. In some fashion, metadata from them will have been delivered to a service. That service will have regurgitated it into some form of personal ad, meaning they have been influenced in some fashion, whether negatively or positively toward tech. They have been influenced by tech in some fashion. And I feel like the pushback may come when it's too late.
Maybe, yeah.
That's my...
So I'm going to have to run off soon, but I have a couple of things.
Sure.
On the hierarchy of importance of human behavior, right?
Yeah.
What makes changes? Is it action, thoughts, or emotion, or intent?
It's probably a Venn diagram of all of them, right?
But which one really matters the most?
Is that specifically to me, or is that just generally?
Just in general, as a human, today, for you to be able to improve in whatever way you want to improve, is it the thought that matters the most, the intent for you to do it, or the action of you doing it?
I think for me, it's probably the intent.
Mm-hmm.
And then it would be the action, then it would be the thought.
Yeah. So in acceptance commitment therapy and all these kind of mental models, right? The idea is take a thing, a thought or an emotion or a value that you have, and then attach an action to it, because the action will actually is what drives the thing, right? So thoughts are kind of like passing cars. We can just watch them go by and go, well, okay, that was a thought, that was nice, but I haven't done anything, right? So we can think Instagram's horrible or Facebook or whatever, but it's until you actually do a thing, an action, that it makes a difference, right? Yes. So you can choose to act and post, or you can choose to disengage, or you can act in a different way, right? That will actually make a difference. But the whole point of what I'm saying is really at the core of it, just live consciously. Consciously make a decision, as opposed to operating in this subconscious space of just habit, right? You've just been programmed to do this thing and you're doing it and you're like, why the fuck am I doing this again? Right? Live consciously and take an action that may go completely against your thoughts, because your thoughts aren't always right. Your brain's a master at creating shit, right? So he's like, don't delete it because you might need, like, all right, well, just do it. Just act in the way that you know is like in line with your values, right? So if your values say that actually I really want to be more present with my partner, or and this is not really that good for me, there are going to be a million reasons as to why you can't. Your brain will create a million. Like, try this exercise for me, Harry. Think to yourself, I can't scratch my head, and just keep repeating it in your thoughts. Say, I can't scratch my head, and then scratch your head. Go on. Does your thought dictate your action?
Sure.
Right? How many times have you thought, I'm really tired, I can't train tonight? No, you can be both. You can be really tired and train tonight.
Yeah.
Right? So live consciously. Make decisions that are in line with your values, rather than like operating because everybody's operating that way and the whole world's going in that direction and it's going against what you value. Don't do it. Right? There'll be a million reasons as to why you shouldn't, and you'll want to avoid unpleasant feelings and you'll want to avoid being whatever, but take the action that is in line with your values.
I think that's a fabulous place to leave it.
Yeah, I think so.
As always, these conversations are too short. But look, you're an incredibly busy man and you've got a day ahead of you. Thank you very much for the hour of your time. As always, I love you very much. I love these conversations we have, and I hope that we're able to do it soon.
Absolutely. Let's do it again. Yeah, sooner rather than later. Let's talk training and yeah,
Absolutely.
Something a bit more lighthearted.
Absolutely.
All right, man.
All right,
See you
mate.
soon.
Take care of yourself. Have a lovely day. Cheers.